The storm came without warning. One moment, the sky above Santa Monica was painted in fading shades of orange and violet. The next, it turned violent. The wind howled across the shoreline, ripping through umbrellas and sending empty chairs tumbling across the sand. Daniel Hayes had seen storms before. Running a small beach cafe meant living at the mercy of the ocean. But this one felt different. Sudden. Angry. Personal. He was locking up for the night when thunder cracked across the sky, so loud it rattled the cafe windows. He paused, glancing toward the water. That was when he heard it. A scream. Faint. Almost swallowed by the wind. He froze. For a split second, he told himself it was nothing. Just the storm twisting sound into something human. But then it came again. Desperate. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs as he ran toward the shoreline. The waves were monstrous now, crashing violently against the rocks. White foam exploded into the air as lightning split the sky in jagged streaks of blue. And then he saw her. A figure in the water. Barely visible between the rising swells. She wasn't swimming. She was fighting. Her arms thrashed desperately before another wave swallowed her whole. There was no time to think. Daniel kicked off his shoes mid-stride. His phone slipped from his hand into the sand. Forgotten. The cold wind bit into his skin as he ran straight into the chaos. The water hit him like ice. It stole the air from his lungs and dragged at his body with terrifying force. The current pulled sideways, trying to claim him too. But he pushed forward. Wave after wave crashed into his chest. Salt water burned his eyes. His muscles screamed as he fought against the pull. And then, he reached her. She was limp. Her body floated unnaturally still between the swells, her blonde hair fanned across the surface like silk in dark water. For a split second, fear gripped him. Was he too late? No, he muttered through clenched teeth. He wrapped one arm firmly around her waist, pulling her against his chest. She felt impossibly light. Fragile. Another wave crashed over them, nearly tearing her from his grip. Daniel tightened his hold. "I've got you," he breathed, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. Every stroke back to shore felt like a battle. The ocean didn't want to let her go. It pulled at her legs, dragged at his strength, fought him with everything it had. But Daniel refused to surrender. When his feet finally touched sand, his knees nearly gave out. He stumbled forward, half carrying, half dragging her through the surf until they collapsed onto the wet shoreline. The storm raged around them. But all he could see was her. She was pale. Too pale. Her lips slightly parted, unmoving. Hey, stay with me," he said urgently, brushing wet hair away from her face. No response. His heart began to pound in his ears. Daniel leaned closer, pressing his ear near her lips. Nothing. No breath. For a brief, horrifying moment, the world seemed to go silent. "Come on," he whispered, panic creeping into his voice. "Don't do this." He tilted her head back carefully and began CPR. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Again. And again. Rain mixed with salt water on his face. His arms trembled from exhaustion. Thunder boomed overhead, as if counting down the seconds. Each moment stretched endlessly. He refused to stop. "Please," he murmured under his breath. "Come back." Then, she coughed. Suddenly. Violently. Water spilled from her mouth as her body jerked beneath his hands. Daniel inhaled sharply, relief crashing over him harder than any wave had. Her chest rose. Then again. Her eyelids fluttered weakly before opening. And when they did, the storm disappeared. Her eyes were grey. Sharp. Striking. Even in the darkness, they seemed almost silver. They locked onto his face as though he were the only thing anchoring her to this world. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Her breathing was shallow but steady now. "Am I?" she whispered faintly, her voice fragile as glass. "Am I alive?" Daniel let out a shaky laugh he didn't realize he'd been holding back. "Yeah," he said softly. "You are." Her gaze didn't leave his. She looked at him like he was something unreal. Like he had pulled her back from somewhere she wasn't sure she wanted to leave. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Emergency lights flickered against the dark sky, growing closer. But she didn't look toward them. Instead, her trembling hand reached up. Her fingers tightened weakly around his soaked shirt, gripping it like he might disappear. "Don't leave," she murmured. The words hit him deeper than he expected. He didn't know her name. He didn't know why she had been in the water. He didn't know where she came from. But in that moment, as she lay shaking in his arms beneath the raging sky, none of that seemed to matter. He shook his head gently. "I'm not going anywhere." The paramedics rushed toward them moments later, voices sharp and urgent. They began assessing her condition, wrapping her in thermal blankets, asking rapid-fire questions. Daniel stepped back slightly, but her hand never let go. Even as they lifted her onto the stretcher. Even as they began wheeling her toward the ambulance. Her eyes searched for him through the flashing lights. And without fully understanding why, he followed. Rain soaked through his clothes. His body ached. His lungs still burned from saltwater. But his focus never wavered from the woman on that stretcher. There was something about her. Something that didn't belong to the storm. Something powerful beneath the vulnerability. As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens roared back to life, Daniel stood there for a moment, watching the red lights disappear down the coast. The ocean behind him slowly began to calm. The wind softened. The storm that had arrived without warning was already passing. But Daniel knew something with absolute certainty. Tonight hadn't been random. The ocean had taken something. And then, somehow, it had given something back. He had walked onto that beach a cafe owner. A man with a simple life and simple worries. But as he stared into the distance where the ambulance lights faded into darkness, he had no idea that the woman he pulled from the ocean, the stranger who had whispered "Don't leave," was not just fighting for her life. She was one of the most powerful women in the country. And saving her was about to change his life forever. Morning came quietly. Too quietly. The storm that had terrorized the coastline just hours before was gone. The sky over Santa Monica was clear again, pale blue stretching endlessly over a world that looked untouched. But Daniel Hayes didn't feel untouched. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face beneath the lightning. Pale. Still. Slipping away. By sunrise, he gave up trying. He showered, changed into clean clothes, and drove toward the hospital with a feeling he couldn't explain. He told himself it was simple human decency. Anyone would check in. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the whole truth. The automatic hospital doors slid open with a soft mechanical hum. Inside, everything felt sterile. Bright. Calm. A complete contrast to the chaos of the night before. He approached the reception desk. "Hi," he said, clearing his throat. "The woman brought in from the beach last night. From the storm." The nurse typed something into her computer. "You're Daniel Hayes." He blinked. "Yeah." "She asked if you'd come." That surprised him more than it should have. The nurse hesitated slightly before adding, "She's stable. Physically, she's going to be fine." Daniel let out a breath of relief. "But," the nurse continued carefully, "she doesn't remember anything." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Temporary memory loss. Likely trauma-induced. We're running tests, but for now, she doesn't know who she is." The words hit harder than expected. Doesn't know who she is. Daniel stood still for a moment. Then he nodded. "Can I see her?" Room 312. He paused outside the door, suddenly unsure why his heart was racing. He barely knew her. He didn't even know her name. But when he knocked softly and stepped inside, she was standing by the window. Sunlight poured across her shoulders, illuminating strands of blonde hair that now fell softly around her face. She wore a simple hospital robe, white and delicate against her pale skin. For a moment, she didn't notice him. She was staring out at the city like it might give her answers. "You came back," she said quietly, without turning around. Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah. I figured I should make sure you're not planning another swim." That earned the smallest hint of a smile. When she turned to face him, her eyes looked clearer than they had on the beach. Still sharp. Still grey. but now filled with something else. Confusion. They told me you saved me, she said. He shrugged slightly. You were doing most of the fighting. She studied him carefully. Do I know you? The question was soft. Almost hopeful. Daniel shook his head. No. We've never met. A flicker of something passed through her expression. Disappointment. Fear. I don't remember anything, she admitted. Not my name. Not where I live. Not what I do. She looked down at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. I feel like I should be someone, she whispered. But I'm just empty. Daniel stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. You're not empty, he said gently. You survived a storm that nearly killed you. That says something. She looked up at him again. Who am I? She asked. And for the first time, Daniel had no answer. He hesitated. You're someone who fought the ocean, he said carefully. And won. A faint exhale escaped her lips. That's dramatic. Nearly drowning tends to be. She almost laughed. Almost. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt suspended. Like both of them were standing on the edge of something unknown. Did I seem? She hesitated. Was I scared? Daniel remembered the way her hand had gripped his shirt. The way her voice trembled. You were fighting, he said. Even unconscious, it felt like you weren't ready to give up. She turned back toward the window. I don't know why I was in the water. Accident, he suggested. Maybe. But her tone carried doubt. There was a knock at the door. A doctor entered, flipping through a tablet. Good morning, he said. We're still waiting on identification. No purse, no phone found at the scene. Daniel frowned. Nothing washed up. The doctor shook his head. It's as if she came from nowhere. Nowhere. The word hung in the air. After the doctor left, she sat slowly on the edge of the bed. What if no one's looking for me? She asked. Daniel didn't like the way that sounded. Someone is, he said firmly. Trust me. How do you know? He didn't. But something about her presence felt important. Like she didn't belong to anonymity. Before he could respond, movement outside the hospital window caught his eye. Across the street, 2 black SUVs had pulled up. Dark windows. Engine still running. Men in suits stepped out. They weren't doctors. They weren't family. They scanned the building with quiet intensity. Daniel's stomach tightened. Do you have enemies? He asked suddenly. She looked at him, startled. I don't even know if I have friends. Fair point. But something didn't sit right. Those vehicles didn't look like concerned relatives. They looked strategic. Powerful. Deliberate. A few minutes later, hospital administration requested to see her privately. When she returned, her expression had changed. There are people downstairs asking about me, she said quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened. Who? They won't say. Fear flickered briefly across her face, but it didn't consume her. Instead, something else surfaced. Authority. Even without memory, it was there. Instinctive. Controlled. She straightened slightly. If I'm someone important, she said slowly, why don't I feel it? Daniel stepped closer now. Maybe being important isn't something you feel, he said. Maybe it's something other people project onto you. She searched his face carefully. And what do you see? He didn't hesitate. I see someone who nearly died, he said honestly. And the only thing she cared about was whether she was still alive. Her breath caught slightly. You don't see money. No. Power. No. What if I'm terrible? She asked quietly. What if I remember everything and I don't like the person I was? Daniel thought about that. The storm. The ocean. The way she held on. I don't think terrible people fight that hard to survive, he said. Outside, one of the suited men entered the hospital lobby. The atmosphere shifted. The calm morning was cracking. Whoever she was. The world had started looking for her. And it wasn't going to take long before it found her. She glanced toward the door. then back at Daniel. "Will you stay?" she asked softly. The same words as the night before. He exhaled slowly. This wasn't his world. Black SUVs. Security. Mystery. But when he looked at her, lost. Brave. Holding herself together with quiet strength. He nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I'll stay." Neither of them knew what was coming. Neither of them knew that within hours, the door to that hospital room would burst open. And the stranger with no memory would be revealed as one of the most powerful women in the country. But for now, she was just a woman with no past. And the only thing anchoring her to the present was the man who refused to walk away. The knock wasn't soft. It wasn't hesitant. It was precise. Controlled. The kind of knock that belonged to people who were used to entering rooms without asking twice. Daniel looked up from the chair beside her hospital bed. She was sitting upright now, sunlight spilling across her shoulders, turning her blonde hair almost gold. For a moment, the room had felt calm. Normal. Then the door opened. Two men in dark tailored suits stepped inside first. Their expressions were neutral, but their eyes scanned everything: the exits, the windows, Daniel. Security. Behind them walked a woman in a navy power suit, heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. She looked polished. Composed. Until she saw the woman in the bed. Her composure shattered. "Oh my God." She rushed forward, stopping just short of the bed as if afraid to touch her. "Ms. Laurent." The name struck the room like lightning. Daniel frowned slightly. The woman beside him blinked. "I'm sorry, who?" she asked, her voice steady but confused. The woman in the suit swallowed hard. "Isabella Laurent." Silence. Even the machines in the room seemed quieter. Daniel slowly turned toward her. "Isabella." It sounded powerful. Familiar in a distant way. The woman in the bed shook her head faintly. "I don't know that name." The assistant's relief shifted into concern. "What do you mean you don't?" "She has memory loss," Daniel interrupted calmly. "Temporary. The doctors said trauma." All eyes turned to him. The security men studied him carefully now, not as background, but as a variable. "And you are?" one of them asked. "Daniel Hayes." "And your connection to Ms. Laurent?" He didn't like the tone. "She was drowning," he said evenly. "I pulled her out." A subtle shift moved through the room. Respect. Suspicion. Calculation. The assistant exhaled slowly. "Ms. Laurent, you're the CEO of Laurent Global Holdings." The words felt surreal. "You've been missing for 72 hours. Isabella's brows furrowed slightly. "Missing?" "There's been a national search," the assistant continued. "Private investigators. Law enforcement. The board is in crisis." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. CEO. National search. This wasn't just wealth. This was influence. Power. Isabella looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers slowly as if trying to connect with the identity being described. "I run a company," she asked quietly. "You run one of the largest corporations in the country." The assistant's voice softened. "You're one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America." The word billionaire echoed in Daniel's mind. He glanced at her. She didn't look different. She looked lost. "I don't remember any of it," she said. The assistant's jaw tightened. "We need to move you to a secure facility immediately." "No." The word was sharp. Instinctive. Everyone paused. Even Daniel felt it. That shift. The tone wasn't uncertain. It wasn't fragile. It was authoritative. Isabella lifted her gaze slowly. "He stays," she said, nodding toward Daniel. One of the security men stepped forward slightly. That's not advisable." Her eyes moved to him. And something changed. The confusion didn't disappear, but beneath it, something stronger surfaced. "Control." "I said," she repeated calmly, "he stays." Silence. The assistant gave a small nod. "Of course." Daniel felt the weight of the room pressing in. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not in rooms like this. Not in stories like this. Isabella turned toward him. Is this real? She asked softly. It looks real, he replied. I'm that person. Apparently. She studied his face carefully. Does it change anything? He hesitated. What do you mean? If I'm powerful, rich, important. Her voice grew quieter. Does that make me different from who you met? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He remembered the storm. Her hand gripping his shirt. Her whisper, don't leave. It changes your life, he said finally. Not who you were on that beach. Her shoulders eased slightly. Outside the hospital room, the atmosphere was shifting. Phones rang. Footsteps moved faster. News was spreading. The assistant's phone buzzed. She stepped aside to answer it. Yes, she's awake, she whispered urgently. Daniel looked back at Isabella. Fragments of emotion crossed her face. Fear. Curiosity. Something darker. Why was I in the ocean? She asked quietly. The assistant ended her call. We're still reviewing the details. Reviewing. Daniel caught the hesitation. So it wasn't just a swim, Isabella pressed. The assistant hesitated. You were last seen boarding a private yacht for a board meeting. A yacht. Storm. Ocean. Daniel's jaw tightened. And? Isabella asked. There was disagreement during the meeting. With who? Board members. Silence settled heavily over the room. This wasn't sounding like an accident anymore. Isabella's breathing slowed, not panicked, but deliberate. If I was missing for 3 days, she said carefully, why wasn't I found immediately? No one answered. The security men exchanged a brief glance. That was answer enough. A phone screen lit up in the assistant's hand. Her expression drained of color. It's on the news. She turned the screen toward Isabella. Breaking headline. Billionaire CEO Isabella Laurent found alive after disappearance. Images flashed, corporate headquarters, stock tickers, financial analysts speculating. The world was watching. Daniel stepped back slightly. This was beyond him. Beyond storms and CPR and sand. This was global. But Isabella barely looked at the screen. Instead, she looked at him. You didn't know who I was, she said. No. You didn't ask for anything. No. A faint breath escaped her. Good. She slowly swung her legs off the bed. Security moved instinctively. I'm fine, she said firmly. And despite everything, they listened. She stood. Still weak. Still recovering. But there was something unmistakable in the way she held herself. Presence. Even stripped of memory. She carried authority like instinct. She walked toward the window. Reporters were gathering below. Cameras aimed upward. Her reflection stared back at her. Isabella Laurent. CEO. Billionaire. Missing woman. Survivor. She touched the glass lightly. Why do I feel like someone wanted me gone? She murmured. Daniel felt the weight of that question settle into his bones. Because deep down, he had been thinking the same thing. She turned back toward him. When I remember everything, she said quietly, promise me something. What? If I'm not the woman you met that night. Her voice softened. If I'm colder, harder, different. She held his gaze. Tell me. Daniel stepped closer. I will. Outside, sirens grew louder. Cameras flashed. The world had found its missing billionaire. But standing in that hospital room, she wasn't a headline. She wasn't a CEO. She was a woman who had nearly died. And a man who had refused to let her. The storm that night had ended. But something far more dangerous was just beginning. Because powerful people don't fall into oceans by accident. And empires don't panic without reason. Whatever had happened on that yacht wasn't over. Not even close. Power has a scent. It smells like polished marble floors. Like glass towers scraping the sky. Like silence in rooms where millions of dollars can change direction with a single word. Daniel felt it the moment the car stopped in front of the headquarters of Laurent Global Holdings. The skyscraper rose above Manhattan like a monument to control. Sleek. Untouchable. Reflecting the sky in cold blue glass. Beside him, Isabella sat quietly in the back of the black car. No hospital robe now. No confusion in her posture. She wore a tailored emerald green suit that fit her like armor. Sharp lines. Controlled elegance. Her blonde hair fell neatly over her shoulders. She looked different. Not colder. Just clearer. Some memories had begun returning in fragments during the flight to New York. Faces. Arguments. Raised voices. A yacht deck under storm clouds. Not enough to tell the full story, but enough to know this. She hadn't fallen. The car door opened. Security surrounded them immediately. Cameras flashed from behind barricades across the street. Reporters shouted questions. Ms. Laurent, was it an accident? Were you attacked? Is the board responsible? Isabella didn't look at them. She stepped forward with measured confidence. Daniel followed, feeling completely out of place in his simple jacket and jeans. Inside, the lobby was silent. Employees lined the sides discreetly, pretending to work while watching her every move. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than it was. Neither of them spoke. When the doors opened, tension was waiting. The boardroom doors stood closed at the end of a long corridor. Behind them, the people who had run her company during her disappearance. The people who had been on that yacht. Isabella stopped walking. She inhaled slowly. You don't have to come in, she said quietly to Daniel. He looked at her. I'm not leaving. A faint flicker of appreciation passed through her eyes. Then she pushed the doors open. The room fell silent instantly. 12 people sat around a long glass table. Expensive suits. Controlled expressions. Carefully masked shock. But beneath it, fear. Isabella, one of the older board members said, rising slowly. We're relieved you're safe. Relieved. The word sounded rehearsed. She walked to the head of the table. Her chair. No one stopped her. I'm sure you are, she replied evenly. Daniel remained near the wall, silent, observing. Another board member cleared his throat. There's been significant instability in the market. Investors are demanding answers. I'm aware, Isabella said. Her voice was calm, but sharp. We were told you fell overboard during the storm, the older man continued carefully. Is that what you were told? She asked. A pause. Eyes shifted subtly around the table. That's what was reported, he corrected. Isabella rested her palms lightly against the glass surface. Fragments flickered behind her eyes. The yacht. The wind. An argument escalating. You pushed too far, Isabella. A voice from memory. You don't control this alone. Her breathing slowed deliberately. There was a vote, she said quietly. Several members stiffened. Yes, another admitted. Regarding the merger. A merger. Now it was clearer. She had refused it. I declined, she said. You endangered the company's growth, someone snapped before catching himself. Silence fell again. Daniel watched carefully. The shift had happened. This wasn't concern. It was resentment. You called an emergency meeting on a yacht, Isabella continued. In the middle of a storm. It was urgent, the older man insisted. And then what? She asked softly. No one answered. Her eyes moved from face to face. Searching. One of them wouldn't meet her gaze. A younger board member. Nervous hands. Tight jaw. Memory struck like lightning. A hand at her back. Not hard. But deliberate. The deck slick with rain. Her heel slipping. But not entirely on its own. Her pulse quickened. You argued with me, she said slowly, eyes locked on the younger man. You said if I wouldn't sign, you'd find someone who would. He swallowed. That's business. And when I refused? His silence was louder than any confession. Daniel felt the temperature in the room drop. Isabella straightened. You tried to remove me. That's absurd, the older man snapped. No, she corrected. It's strategy. She turned slightly, addressing the entire table now. You believed that without memory, without proof, I'd disappear quietly. A heavy pause. But I didn't. The younger board member's composure cracked. You have no evidence, he said sharply. Her gaze sharpened. Security footage from the yacht will say otherwise. His face drained of color. Because they both knew. There had been cameras. And footage can be erased. But rarely perfectly. The older man attempted to regain control. This is not the time for accusations. The company needs stability. And it will have it, Isabella replied coolly. But not under manipulation. She pressed a button embedded in the table. The large screen behind her illuminated. Financial reports appeared. Data. Transfers. Internal communications. She had come prepared. During my absence, she said, shares were shifted. Votes were consolidated. The room grew tense. You were preparing to force the merger while I was presumed dead. No one denied it. Daniel watched her carefully. This wasn't the woman confused in a hospital room. This was the woman who built an empire. And if I had died? She asked quietly. Silence. Because they had considered that possibility. She stepped back from the table. Effective immediately, there will be an internal investigation. The older man scoffed slightly. You can't just. I can, she interrupted calmly. Because I still hold majority control. That landed heavily. Power wasn't just personality. It was paperwork. And she had it. Security entered the room quietly at her signal. The younger board member's face paled further. This isn't over, he muttered. No, she agreed. It isn't. She turned toward the door. Daniel followed. As the doors closed behind them, the tension inside the boardroom snapped like a stretched wire. In the quiet corridor, Isabella stopped walking. Her shoulders lowered slightly. The weight of command slipping just enough. Are you okay? Daniel asked. She nodded faintly. I remember more now. And? Her eyes darkened. It wasn't an accident. Outside the building, cameras continued flashing. The world believed she had survived a storm. But the real storm had never been the ocean. It had been betrayal. And now, the empire was awake. And so was she. The board had tried to remove her quietly. To replace her. To control what she built. But they had underestimated one thing. She survived. And when powerful people survive something meant to end them, they don't return weaker. They return unstoppable. The war for her company had officially begun. And this time, she wasn't the one falling. Power can protect you. Power can build empires. Power can silence rooms. But it cannot hold your hand when the lights go out. 3 weeks after the boardroom confrontation, the storm had shifted. Not outside. Inside. Laurent Global Holdings had launched a full internal investigation. Digital records were recovered. Deleted footage from the yacht was restored. Financial manipulation was exposed. The younger board member resigned first. The older one followed shortly after, under pressure. Publicly, it was called corporate restructuring. Privately, it was survival. Isabella Laurent had taken back control of her empire. But power comes with a cost. Daniel felt it the moment he stepped onto the balcony of her Manhattan penthouse one evening. The city stretched endlessly beneath them. A sea of lights. Cold. Distant. Impressive. Isabella stood near the glass railing, wearing a simple black silk dress. No cameras. No executives. No security in sight. Just her. She had insisted on dismissing them for the night. I needed silence, she had said. Now she stared at the skyline as if it belonged to someone else. You look like you're about to conquer something, Daniel said softly as he joined her. She didn't smile. I already did. There was no pride in her voice. Only reflection. The investigation had confirmed it. The yacht footage showed an argument escalating. A hand at her back. A calculated push during the storm's chaos. Not enough to look like murder at first glance, but enough to prove intent. They had assumed the ocean would finish what they started. Instead, the ocean had given her back. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked quietly. "Every day," Daniel admitted. "I remember the moment now," she said. The deck was slippery. I turned to walk away. And then, pressure at my back. Her fingers tightened around the railing. "I thought it was the storm." She paused. "It wasn't." Daniel didn't interrupt. "I built that company from nothing," she continued. "Long nights. No investors who believed in me. Every contract earned." She looked at him finally. "And the people I trusted most tried to erase me." He stepped closer. "You didn't let them." Her eyes softened slightly. "No," she said. "I didn't." For weeks, she had moved like a machine, decisive, controlled, relentless. Reclaiming control. Stabilizing stocks. Reassuring investors. The world praised her resilience. Headlines called her unstoppable. But Daniel had seen the quiet moments. The weight behind her eyes. "Do you ever get tired?" he asked gently. She laughed faintly. "I don't know how to stop." That was the truth. She had lived in survival mode for years. Climbing. Protecting. Fighting. Even before the yacht. "I almost died," she said suddenly. The words hung in the air. And all I could think when I woke up was whether I was alive. She turned toward him fully now. "Not about my company. Not about money. About living," Daniel said. "About breathing." Her voice softened. "And the only thing I saw when I opened my eyes was you." The city noise felt distant. Muted. "You were the only thing that felt real," she continued. "No titles. No power. Just human." Daniel held her gaze. "I didn't see a billionaire," he said. "I saw someone who needed help." "And you didn't hesitate." "No." She stepped closer. "Do you know how rare that is in my world?" He shrugged slightly. "I don't belong in your world." "That's the point," she whispered. Silence wrapped around them. Comfortable. Heavy with meaning. "For the first time in my life," she admitted, "I don't want to win something." He tilted his head slightly. "What do you want?" She looked at him as if the answer scared her more than any boardroom battle. "I want peace." A simple word. But foreign in her vocabulary. "And what does peace look like to you?" he asked. She exhaled slowly. "No security teams following me. No board members questioning me. No cameras." She hesitated. "Just someone who stays." The memory of the beach flickered between them. "Don't leave." He stepped forward and took her hand. "I'm still here." Her fingers tightened instinctively. "I don't need saving," she said softly. "I know. But I want choosing." He understood. This wasn't about rescue anymore. It was about decision. "You have a company that depends on you," he said carefully. "Thousands of employees." "I know. You can't just walk away." "I'm not going to." Her eyes sharpened slightly. "But I can change how I live inside it." The ocean had taken something from her. But it had also stripped away illusion. Money couldn't replace breath. Power couldn't replace presence. "I built Laurent Global," she said quietly. "But it doesn't get to own me." For the first time, Daniel saw something shift completely. Not strength. Not control. Balance. Weeks later, headlines changed. Isabella Laurent announced structural reforms within her company. Shared decision-making. Transparency policies. New ethics oversight. Investors called it strategic brilliance. Analysts praised her leadership evolution. They didn't know the truth. The truth was simpler. She had faced death. And it rearranged her priorities. 1 month after the investigation closed, Isabella asked Daniel to fly back to California with her. No press. No announcement. Just a quiet trip. They stood on the same beach where the storm had nearly ended everything. But tonight, the ocean was calm. Soft waves brushing against the shore under a golden sunset. She wore a light champagne-colored dress that moved gently in the breeze. Barefoot in the sand. No armor. No emerald suit. Just her. Daniel stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "You're not afraid?" he asked. "Of the ocean?" She shook her head. "No." She looked out at the horizon. "It tried to take me once. It failed." Then she turned toward him. "You didn't." The simplicity of that statement held more weight than any headline. "I could lose everything tomorrow," she said quietly. "The company. The money. The status." Her eyes locked onto his. "But I won't lose myself again." He reached for her hand. "And you won't lose me." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in gold and rose. For the first time since the storm, there was no tension in her shoulders. No battle behind her eyes. Just calm. Power had tried to define her. Betrayal had tried to break her. The ocean had tried to end her. But in the end, it wasn't the empire that saved her. It wasn't the wealth. It wasn't the boardroom victories. It was a man who didn't know her name. And didn't care what it was worth. And standing there on the shore where everything began, Isabella Laurent finally understood something more powerful than control. Survival is strength. But love is choice. And this time, she chose him.